Hello everyone, welcome to Katharine's Creatures, and this is episode 62, and this is a series where I get to touch base and talk about various mythological beasts, beings, and the like, pulled from lore worldwide. And I always like to preface by saying that I'm not a linguist, so if I mispronounce anything along the way, I apologize in advance. I do try my best. And today we're actually going to go through a lot of terminology from around the world because I'm going to actually be talking about a particular umbrella term. And I haven't really talked about an umbrella term pertaining to mythos since probably pretty early on in this series when I'm pretty sure I talked about theremorph. And the term for theremorph is essentially, some of you remember, it's any kind of shape-shifting entity. So it's vampires, witches, in my case, in my books, again, these animal shifters, but theremorph just means a shifter, someone who can transform their shape. So today's particular umbrella term of note, we're going to be talking about psychopomps. And what are psychopomps? They're essentially, well, let me actually get back to the word psychopomp itself. Psychopomp comes from ancient Greece, and it means guide of the dead. So that's what they are. They're any particular entities, and they can take the form in a whole slew of ways, from spirits, deities, angels, demons, creatures, like I said, all kind of things. But essentially, it is whatever the entity is that transports and helps or assists a soul, living soul, a soul from someone who recently died, to the land of the dead or to their afterlife. So that's what they do, is they're just helping you get from point A to point B, realm of the living, realm of the dead. And they are not the judges. They do not, inflict punishment. They are simply your guides. And they can also take forms of anthropomorphic entities from like ravens, dogs, horses, deer, cuckoos, will-o'-the-wisps. These are all vultures. These are all animals, or these anthropomorphized entities that serve as psychopomps, and again, as their guides of the dead. Now, in lore, all over the world, you can find versions of psychopomps. Starting from ancient Egypt, one of the ones that we all can think of is the god Anubis. And this jackal-headed god, he would help the soul who recently died and go through the entire journey, because it was a long journey to get them from the realm of the living to their afterlife in the hall of Osiris, the king of the underworld. And that's why you had the Books of the Dead. The Books of the Dead were these long scripts full of spells and what to say and what you're supposed to do when you meet each particular entity along your way for this over-dramatized, this very long journey from the living realm to the dead. And Anubis, again, served as your guide. And so that's pretty neat. That's one many of us are kind of familiar with. But in Hinduism, you have the god Yama does a very similar thing. Ancient Greek, one of the very famous ones is Chiron, the river boatman. So you have like the ferryman imagery. Well, that comes back from Chiron. But also in ancient Greek, you had a couple other deities that served the similar kind of similar ways for various people, including the goddess Hecate and the god Hermes. In ancient Rome, Hermes' counterpart, Mercury, serves sometimes as a psychopomp. But as you can see, essentially, all sorts of mythos and religions that are even currently practiced have some kind of form of a psychopomp. Going back to Norse, Valkyrie. So we usually, I guess nowadays, depict Valkyrie with wings or winged helmets. And, they're the armored, all female entities from Norse mythology that would select the worthy souls and take the worthy souls to a specific place, in this case Valhalla, Odin's mead hall. But all the way back to the Aztecs, they had a entity called Xolotl. Hopefully I pronounced that one right. Slavic myth, you had Morana, Etrusian, oh my god, I'm tongue-tying myself. Myth, you had the god, I think it was a god Vanith, but entity Vanith. And again, they're found repeatedly all around the world, some kind of entity that takes you from one place to another. Even some belief systems that are believed right now. Filipino, there is an entity called Anito that does the very same things. And Anito is essentially your kind of an ancestral spirit that calls out to the living and helps, bring them and beckon them on their right path. In Islam, so as Islamic belief systems, there is an angel of death named Azrael, which is really cool to me because I had just finished watching his Dark Materials on HBO, and I've read the books before, and they have a character named Azrael, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, that's where the name comes from. But yeah, Azrael is the angel of death. But psychopomps have sometimes taken other forms too, not just in myth and religions, but other case in point, psychology. Who knew? So there is a branch of psychology that was, fairly popular a number of years ago, and this was Jungian psychology. And this man's Carl Jung believed in all sorts of these kind of archetypes. So these big themes that essentially humanity all believed in. Interesting stuff. Not to go too far into his belief system, but a Jungian psychology, there is a sort of psychopomp kind of idea where there is a mediator between your conscious and your unconscious and the realms which both exist. And, that term psychopomp came up a couple times in that type of psychology. So interesting things. But it is a fun term. It's a fun thing to be aware of, that there is a whole huge category of entities that serve this one purpose. They are the guides of the souls. So if you have any questions about this or anything else, post them in the comments below, or just reach out to me on some of my other social media and say hi. And until next time, Skull.